Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a training philosophy that is literally dominating the running world right now, the Norwegian Method. I mean, if you've been watching any elite distance running lately, you've seen the records totally falling. You've probably heard all the buzzwords, right? Lactate testing, double thresholds, control. But today, we're actually looking under the hood. We're going to break down the science and the strategy to give you a brief summary and the key elements of exactly how the Norwegian Method works.
To really get why this method is such a game changer, we kind of have to look at what it replaced. You know the phrase, no pain, no gain, right? Back in the 1990s, the whole Western training mentality was just about pushing to the absolute, literal limit. You went to the track and you ran intervals until you basically collapsed. It was almost like a badge of honor to completely empty the tank in a workout. But as we know now, constantly chasing that sheer exhaustion, it usually just leads to a massive plateau, or even worse, total physical burnout.
And this whole paradigm shift is absolutely crucial. The traditional push-to-failure approach carries a massively high injury risk. You're basically rolling the dice with your muscular system every single week. But the Norwegian Method, it is entirely built on precision and control. It's all about finding exactly how much work you can do to trigger an adaptation without crossing that dangerous red line into physiological breakdown. So it's this incredibly calculated low-risk philosophy for building volume safely over time.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, the Norwegian running revolution, then Bakken's training laboratory, followed by the pillars of the method, the science of muscle tone, and finally how to apply this to yourself.
Section 1. The Norwegian Running Revolution.
The pioneer behind this whole system is a Norwegian medical doctor and former Olympian named Marius Bakken. Early on, he trained with legendary coaches who, they loved those extreme high-intensity tactics. But Bakken quickly realized that relying purely on that brutal intensity just led straight to burnout. He needed a smarter path. And to find it, just think about the number 5,500. That is the staggering number of blood lactate tests he performed on himself over his career. 5,500. He would literally prick his own finger to draw blood thousands of times during workouts. Talk about suffering for science, right? But he wanted absolute, data-driven proof of what was happening inside his muscles at every given pace. No more just guessing based on how he felt.
Section 2. Bakken's training laboratory.
Bakken's quest for a better way actually took him far beyond Norway. He traveled all the way to Kenya to observe the elite East African runners, who were utterly dominating the sport at the time. And when he tested them, he found something super unexpected. The East Africans were running their hard intervals at naturally lower lactate levels than the Norwegians back home. Why? Well, because they lived and trained at altitude, the thin air acted as this automatic intensity limiter. They literally couldn't push into those highly acidic anaerobic zones as easily. Meanwhile, Western runners at sea level were just blasting high-intensity intervals and dealing with unpredictable muscular breakdown. So Bakken had this massive aha moment. Running slightly slower during hard sessions actually lets you accumulate way more volume without destroying your body.
Section 3. Pillars of the Method. Now, how do we actually put that into praxis? Well, it takes incredible discipline week in and week out. It all comes down to a strict 80-20 distribution. 80% of your running absolutely must be incredibly easy. And by easy, we mean your heart rate stays strictly below 70% of its maximum. The remaining 20%? That's your sub-threshold work, meaning you're running hard, but staying just below that point where lactic acid starts rapidly building up. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that your easy running has to be truly, undeniably easy to protect your body's recovery window. If you let your ego take over and you run too fast on those easy days, the whole system just falls apart because you end up dragging fatigue right into your hard sessions.
And that 20% of hard work? It's often clustered into what is famously known as the double threshold. Basically, this means running 2 sub-threshold interval sessions in a single day, usually one in the morning and one in the evening. This maximizes your aerobic load while keeping muscular stress incredibly low. Now, you might be wondering, why do it all twice in one day? Actually, scratch that. It's more about why cluster it into one single day rather than spreading it out. Well, Bakken discovered that clustering the hard work actually prevents the compounding muscle fatigue that you get from back-to-back hard days throughout the week. You just hit the system twice in one day, and then you leave it alone to recover.
But to actually survive 2 workouts in one day, you absolutely have to stay in what Bakken calls the golden zone. This is a blood lactate concentration roughly between 2.0 and 3.5 millimoles per liter. Think of it exactly like revving a car engine just below the red line. You're driving the engine hard enough to get a massive aerobic benefit and maximize efficiency for sure, but you are staying safely away from that red line, where the engine overheats and mechanical breakdown happens.
Section 4, Science of Muscle Tone.
So beyond just tracking cardiovascular fitness or heart rate, Bakken became deeply, totally obsessed with the physical state of the muscles themselves and how that dictates recovery. He focused heavily on muscle tone, which is basically the resting tension, firmness, and elasticity of a muscle. To put this into perspective, imagine exactly how your legs feel immediately after a 10-hour airplane ride. You step off the plane, and if you tried to go for a run right then, your legs would feel completely flat, stiff, and lacking any sort of pop or spring. That heavy, popless feeling? That is exactly what happens when your muscle tone gets too high and your muscles lose their elasticity.
And this right here is why controlling that muscle tone is the absolute secret weapon of the Norwegian Method. Highly intense anaerobic running spikes your muscle tone rapidly and unpredictably, and high stiffness equals a much, much longer recovery window. Your true recovery time is actually often dictated by this muscular stiffness, not just your cardiovascular fatigue. So by keeping your hard sessions strictly sub-threshold, your muscle tone stays predictable, and those easy days, they aren't just for resting. They're actually an active tool used to lower that muscle tone right back to normal.
Section 5, applying it to yourself.
Okay, don't worry if you aren't an Olympic athlete. Let's break down how this elite protocol maps to a schedule that an everyday runner can actually adapt. Notice the rhythm of a typical week here. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are strictly easy runs. Again, these days exist solely to lower muscle tone. Then you have Tuesday and Thursday. Those are the big double threshold days. Morning intervals, evening intervals. Finally, Saturday features one harder X-Factor session, like hill repeats, just to recruit those fast twitch fibers, followed by a long, easy run on Sunday. The intense double threshold days are perfectly systematically cushioned by very easy recovery days. It's like a giant puzzle that fits perfectly together.
But hey, if running twice a day just isn't feasible for your lifestyle, Bakken outlines a simple 4-step staircase to help recreational runners safely adapt the key elements of this method. First, ensure your current hard workouts are truly sub-threshold. Second, ruthlessly keep your easy days below 70% of your max heart rate. Third, add just one harder X-Factor session a week, like short hills, for strength. And finally, if you really want that threshold volume without the 2-a-days, experiment with Norwegian singles, basically doing slightly longer, controlled interval sessions in a single workout. It still normalizes the muscular system without demanding you train like a full-time pro.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to think about before your very next run. Are you ready to drop the push-to-failure mindset and run with precision? The Norwegian Method absolutely proves that getting faster isn't about how much pain you can endure on a track, it's about how smartly you can manage your body's physiology week after week. Stop chasing exhaustion and start training like a Norwegian scientist. Honestly, it makes you wonder, if precision and data can shatter today's world records, what on earth will the ceiling of human performance look like 10 years from now? Thanks for diving into this with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.